Hi everyone, and welcome to Introduction to Stress Resilience for empath sensitives. And this session is also for healers and therapists for a variety of reasons. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself for those of you who don't maybe know me or who are going to watch the recording. So I'm someone who's a healer. I started studying healing 30 years ago. I have been teaching stress management for over 20 years. I taught meditation as well for over 20 years. And I've been a highly sensitive empath as long as I can remember. Okay. And I suppose, like many people, I wasn't familiar with the term until actually I became a healer. And I'll be honest, I've never really thought enough a lot about it. So the word empath, I suppose, came later than the word sensitive. So like many of you probably, that I was told when I was very young by more or less everyone I knew, I was far too sensitive. I was too soft. And it showed up in different ways, but like many people, I came to, it was almost like being sensitive was a flaw, right? It was regarded as a flaw. So like many people, I tried to toughen up. But I also had high levels of just knowing things which made me a bit confused by the rest of the world. So it was almost like I knew things and I had premonitions and I had all sorts of experiences. But you couldn't understand why other people functioned the way they did and maybe didn't have the same compassion and empathy as others. But I have to add, on that level, I have to say that I do believe that my mother and my father, maybe one empathic, one highly sensitive, a bit of both, but maybe it just showed up in different ways. And like probably most of us didn't know how to function, and some of that is suppressed and then pushed down to the surface. And I have to say, most of my siblings were caring, very caring, but maybe not to the level and the extreme that I did. And I was the oldest of 9, so I was a nurturer and what you would call a caregiver from a very early age, and I was never taught boundaries. So I do believe that the empath in this sense is a bit of nature and nurture. I know some people believe that high levels of empathy are associated with trauma and neglect. I don't completely, I'm not saying I think part of it, but I don't think it's as straightforward for that. And that's why partly some of the things that I'm going to share tonight. And what I have to add is that the empath in the sense of there's a lot of layers to it. And also it's the same as stress management. I've taught stress management and I studied all different aspects of stress management, and I studied it to university level. And sometimes people think stress management is just basic and general things, but stress management is quite a wide subject and there's not a lot of views on it as well. And part of this session was actually created partly for my students on the relaxation training and the stress management practitioner training, but also to cater for the empaths in the sense of the healers that I come in contact with. I worked many years specialising in helping empaths and sensitives, and then I still do it, but it's just not directly. I tend to attract a lot of coaches, healers and therapists that are empathic into my other work, right? So tonight we're going to look at some of the most important fundamentals that I think we have to start with, right? Because I think to maybe clarify certain things, and we all have different ideas and views about things, but I want to clarify what I believe, how you describe an empath and what you describe as a highly sensitive person. And some of the things that I will say will be interchangeable with the empath and sensitive, and some it might have applied more people that are highly empathic, or some people are more highly sensitive, right? So what is an empath? Right, an empath, I don't know if you can actually see that the way that the screen, sorry, I don't know what's happening with that, but anyway, what is an empath? An empath is a person who's finely tuned to the emotions and feelings of animals, places, and people around them. Okay, so they tend to understand what people are thinking and feeling, and they generally you are usually more emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually aware, and they can often be high levels of empathy, obviously, and compassion and things like that, but they generally have this increased awareness. So they feel things, and they in some ways it can be unhealthy. So we can have unhealthy empaths and we can have healthy empaths. I think sometimes people view just the empath as the person that picks up the feelings and emotions of other people. But it can happen, and there's all aspects to, you know, a home being empathic to land, being empathic to places and buildings. There is, you know, there's different strands to it, and it's not even, it goes into other realms, but obviously this is only an introduction, so I just wanted to clarify what that is, right? And one of a lot of the consensus is that most people think that they have high levels of empathy, but many people who think they're an empath and high levels of empathy are not actually an empath. You know, there's a lot of people who would think they are, but some of their behaviors. So, you know, it's not, everyone's not an empath, right? So that's one of the things that is, you know, interesting as well. So the reason I put this little video in, it's maybe not exactly, I was trying to get images in or something that would give us a sense. So when we're aware of other people's emotions and feelings, we process some of that. We process it in our body, but obviously then we process how we think about it in our mind, right? But the empath tends to be, particularly the unhealthy empath, the energy can often be scattered or very out there, right? But not out there in a strong way, right? So you'll see many empaths whose energy tends to bend a lot or moves with other people, right? And if there's someone who's very in their head, who tends to be very anxious, very worrisome, is a ruminative, someone who ruminates a lot, you know, that, so that it goes in the head. There's other things can be going on lower, you know, in relation to our chakras, fears and things like that, but I'm not going to get too much into that at the moment. But there can be a lot of cognitive, but what's happening is the energy's out there. Now, a healthy person would have that light that's there and really strong, right? But also the chakras and everything would be very healthy, right? But what the empath tends to do is they tend to bend to the emotions and feelings, because it's that compassionate part, or you know, if that's really the right word, but they bend to help other people feel comfortable, right? And they move their energy about, right? And if you have been an empath who never learned to have boundaries, you can imagine what that energy field looks like. It can be bending all over the place for every situation, for every people. Now, the unhealthy empath who is triggered by, there is a word for it, I forgot it, but it's when you are reactive in your empathy. That can be, so maybe you watch things on the television and you actually find things quite traumatizing, quite fearful, even though it's not real. It may be just a story, right? But for some reason, it can impact you, and it impacts the stress response and the fear response. And a lot of you will identify with that. Now, I remember going to see the Titanic, and probably what the trigger was, as a child, I had a situation where I nearly drowned, right? And I seem to have lots of bad experiences with water. And when I went to see the Titanic, I was somebody that was quite ill at the time. So I was feeling physically vulnerable. And I remember I found watching the Titanic horrible. I couldn't swim at the time. And my level of, I was at over-identifying with the people. So many empaths who have not healthy boundaries, and also maybe don't have good self-worth and are not centered in lots of reasons, can over-identify with other people's emotion or over-identify with situations. And I didn't even realize it till I was going to an Alexander technique teacher at that time. And he had actually asked if he could do some hypnotherapy on me, but that was another story. It was a bit of a disaster. But anyway, but one of the things that he said to me, oh my goodness, you know, so he realized that I actually put myself totally in the person's, as if I was in their body, right? So I was over-identified, so that's really unhealthy. So some of you, I don't know if any of you, I mean, I know you maybe can't speak, but you can share in the chat if any of you had similar experiences to that. Sorry, ignore that. I don't know, that keeps coming up. It's me clicking something I shouldn't. I'm just going to move on anyway. If you can continue, you know, you can add as we're going. Now, one of the things about unhealthy, if you're more healthy as an empath, you're aware of the energy around you. You're aware of the emotions or feelings, but you're not triggered and reactive to it. You're not impacted by it, right? You stay centered, you're grounded, and you're not as triggered. But we're all human, right? And we all have different levels of triggering. And there's certain situations it's easier to be centered and grounded and be in the moment and be aware that what's happening. And it's also certain times it's easy to say, right, what's my energy and what's someone else's? What am I picking up, right? And sometimes it can be difficult to identify between the empathy and the sensitivity. I had an experience, I was about 18, 19, I was on a train, I'm sure it was to Manchester, and I was sleeping on the train. And so I was coming from Scotland to Manchester, and I woke up with this horrendous feeling. And I'll never, ever, I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that again. It was just dark energy. It felt really dark. And it just wasn't like sadness or anything like that. It was a darkness and a real, very, I could only describe it as very dense. And I woke up kind of going, what the hell, right? And because I had some strange experiences before, I'm like, asked, what's, you know, what is that? What am I picking up? And I was quite young, so I didn't really fully understand these experiences I was having. And then it wasn't till the train, you heard on the train, you know, that we were actually getting into Lockerbie. And it was actually just after the Lockerbie disaster. So I was obviously picking up a lot of trauma there, a lot of fear and a lot of, you know, dense energy. But I just couldn't understand it. And that's one of the examples where we can pick it up from a place, right? So what is a highly sensitive person? So a highly sensitive person is a person who is more finely tuned nervous system that is more sensitive to the mental, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual stimuli around them. And often described by most people we know as too sensitive, right? So that can come mentally, emotionally, as I said, physically, socially, and spiritually, but it can come like, I know Rosemary said allergies. And like, so I was like you, I had as a baby, lots of allergies. I also hated anything that was in my skin that was not of natural fabric. I had lots of reactions to medicine. I have to say my perspective of some of that is that it was telling me that these things were not good for me. Right, these environments. So I think, of course, we can say that there's certain aspects of trauma, and of course we become more sensitive, but there's a lot of things in our environment in the world now that we really shouldn't be exposed to, right? We can see that with some of the things, and one of the things that happened to me was I was mercury poisoned, which is obviously highly toxic and affects the nervous system, which made me even more highly sensitive and ended up giving me a lot of complications in my nervous system. And I think it's like, if you look at some children with sensory processing disorders, right? It's one of those things that obviously, if you're a parent, you're trying to help your child with those sensory processing disorders and make them as resilient as they can. But you're also having to look at that person and say, is that a flaw, or is it just the way that they're made? And I think there's a fine line, because sometimes it's too easy for us to look at everything as because someone comes in different and someone comes in a different way that other people expect you to come in. Is that all about trauma? Or is it that we should be more attuned and sensitive to our surroundings for a variety of reasons? And I remember a thing that struck me. I remember one of my friends said to me when I was ill and I was really at a level of sensitivity that she noticed, and she said, Eileen, you remind me of when I'm pregnant, where suddenly everything becomes like hyper alert. But she says it's like, but it's to protect my baby, right? And she says, and I wonder sometimes, is some of it to do with your illness to protect you, or is it just because you've always been very soft, but you're very generous hearted, but you are you? So I think, sometimes we can look at things and look at it in one extreme, or we can look at another extreme, and I think there's a balance, right? So I don't know if any of you have got any opinions on that in the chat so far, what I've said. If we look and see. Okay, sorry, I missed that. Good evening, Joe. Like Deborah, I get triggered when people are in a bad mood. Sometimes I go back to the child and want to make them happy again. So Deborah, it's the rescuer part of you. You're one of them. But it's also that when we're triggered, what we've got to understand when we're triggered and we want to make them happy, it's also often about us not want to feel uncomfortable either. We don't want to feel their uncomfort. So we have to be able to be aware of that because it triggers something in us, right? And you go back to child because you want to them happy again. So you can understand that. Now, of course, we all want to support people, but it's understand what it's triggering within us, right? And I think that's the key sometimes. Tanya, I felt terrible at Beachy Head down south. And was there something happened there? I'm not sure really where that is, Tanya, sorry. Is that a place that's has there been trauma? It's a big suicide spot. Oh, is it? Right, okay. Right. Well, that was one of the other things that happened to me. I used to go and when I was a young girl, go on a train to Glasgow, and I would have premonitions of feelings, and then the next thing would be suicides on the train. Well, on the train track. Horrible. Yeah, it's funny how we pick up. And I do believe that around the world and places, there's places that have got high vibes, high energy, and there's other places that have low energy for a lot of different reasons. And I think we underestimate that. If you think about even living in poverty areas, living in areas where there's a lot of fear and trauma and distress, why is it harder for people to move out of apathy? Why is it empaths are more likely to be impacted by a lot of these things? So I think it's worth, keeping a conscious awareness. And I know for those of you who are my students, this is the reason why I did this, to think about it from the empath's perspective. And, sometimes one of the things, I've done a lot of courses on empathy and sensitivity and energy attachments and things. And one of the things that Robert Hotto taught, which was quite interesting, who a lot of people regard him as like Caroline Mizzy's kind of protege. He talks about you cannot treat people's psychic gifts right? And you can't always treat them, and that includes sometimes empathic and sensitive gifts with the mental. It's not always a mental attitude, because there's some things that do not come under the mental umbrella. So if someone has a psychic or spiritual gift and a highly intuitive gift, right, it's not covered under modern mental psychology or mental self-development. So this is where a lot of empaths and sensitives struggle, and they also struggle when they're going to coaches and teachers who don't understand their type of sensitive gifts or their level of empathy, or what is part of their purpose, right? And that was one of the biggest challenges that I had. Was I went to all these people, I was told these were the top people, and they were only scratching the surface of some of the challenges that I had. But also it was like, it felt like some people were just reading out a book or just doing what they were told, rather than what they actually experienced, because they hadn't experienced some of the challenges that I had. So it was, it was going a long, long road. And I started to realize that part of it was that I wasn't fully owning my gifts and not worrying about what all these people thought, but it was also understanding that sometimes our gifts come in all shapes and disguises. And yes, part of it can be all mashed up with some trauma. It can be mashed up with health challenges and other things, but it's about is owning that there's gifts in this and that there's strengths in this, and it's turning it around from the victim and actually seeing the strengths and the gifts in it. So this video I've put out, again, it's not exactly what I would have liked. If you can imagine, these little gold things were actually like fine little, antennas, right? And the highly sensitive person has all these little antennas. So make sure, if you can imagine, a normal person is, or the average person has maybe big, antennas, but they have really fine antennas that pick up all the subtle things that are going round about. So I believe that many sensitives, the people are highly sensitive. So I'm not just talking about empathy, I'm talking about the highly sensitive, are fast processors. Why are they fast processors? Because they're so finely tuned that the information and the subtleties they pick up right away. But what happens sometimes is the brain and the body can struggle to process it, and it can cause stress overload, right? If the person is not grounded, is not centered, has a lot of trauma, then you can imagine what that does. Or if the person doesn't understand what's their gifts and is not able to harness it, it's just all this information, right? And that's sometimes why there's certain things are so important in reducing stress. Whoops. Okay, so what is empathic stress? So empathic stress is an endocrine stress response to other people's pain or suffering, and that can include a stress response to collective pain and collective suffering. Now, of course, everybody has a certain level of empathy and have empathic stress, but when we use an empathic stress term, like even in in this kind of context, we're talking about when it becomes kind of dysfunctional and it starts really impacting the person's life, right? And empathic stress often leads to empathic overload, empathic fatigue, and empathic burnout. And some of the jobs that you see this in is nurses. I used to see lots of nurses, and I just probably at the time, I used to get that in my stress management for stress counselling and things. And I probably didn't, at that time, I didn't have the level of understanding that I do of empathy. Now, I recognised in some level, but what they were experiencing was empathic overload, empathic fatigue, and empathic burnout. And compassion then, sometimes this can lead to compassion fatigue, where they can't cope anymore and they shut off emotionally. And that's what happens with a lot of people. They can go one way or the other. And what happens then, the person becomes very disconnected from their heart and very disconnected in the body, from their body, which causes them further problems. So they don't maybe have clear communication, they're coming from fear, and they're coming from exhaustion, and they don't know how to shut off from the world, right? And it has become disabling for them. So also what happens is the energy becomes hugely scattered, right? That's interesting. When nursing, as I got so oversensitized, was often. Rosemary, I can understand that. Yep. Big. You think about what you're expected to do in those type of jobs. I also seen, I get some policewomen, a lot of counsellors, people that were in caring jobs, obviously healers and coaches and therapists. Anybody that is working in a slow, you know, in a close perspective where people are they're dealing with the, I suppose, the dis-ease with other people, whether that is mentally, emotionally, physically, and I'll always add spiritually, because I believe that a lot of challenges come from spiritual disconnection, right? Now, so what is sensory stress? So sensory stress is, you know, obviously sensory overload to different forms of stimuli. So overstimulated by what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you touch and taste, and even know. So someone, if you look at even what they call the clairs, which to do with psychic gifts, you have things like clairvoyance, clairaudient, clairsentient, you know, there's all different ones, and they're all related to the different senses. And what happens, people then see things, feel things, and they maybe see things on a different vibration. So if we think of everything as energy, I meet healers that can see through plants, people who see angelic, who see other things, who speak to people that's passed over, of all sorts of strange experiences, or sense things and see things that other people can't see, right? So when you have someone who's highly empathic and highly sensitive, and they have a high level of, you know, their antenna is so fine that it can pick up, you can imagine in the modern world how stimulating that is and how exhausting. Now, my challenges, and a lot of my students know, got hugely dramatically worse after I had Lyme's disease and I didn't know. And also then I had obviously the mercury poison, but then I had life-threatening sepsis, and I was left with a lot of complications, and I was lucky to be alive. But out of that situation, my nervous system, it was like it took on a whole new level. And it was like when I came into contact with people, instead of being able to normally know somebody had a sore shoulder, or I could feel someone had fear or anxiety, it was like someone had suddenly dialed it up, like honest to God, 300 or 400%. And I actually was, honest to God, nearly collapsing. One time I actually fell over with my dad. I could feel his anxiety, but it was as if it was like the room was vibrating and echoing. That's what it felt like, right? But also I had a problem physically with my spine. My whole body was out of alignment. I was feeling vibrations coming through. If a car went by the house, I could actually feel the vibration through my whole body. So my central nervous system was very compromised, and it became really disabling, right? And I also had a situation, I was born with one of my eyes didn't dilate properly, which always caused me a problem with light, but for some reason then it was even more. Now, if you think about a good example is, again, children with sensory overload, they're a good examples where some of them become, they struggle to function because the world seems very noisy for them, or the senses of the colors are too much for them. The smells, the tastes are so much, right? My son suffers from sensory stress regularly. Nursery was tough for him. He used to build forts in nursery to keep everyone out, as he was overstimulated with the noise and sound. His sense of smell is so sensitive too. Funnily enough, he's asthmatic and he's physically sick if he smells something he dislikes. See, Joanne, that's quite interesting. I do believe that all of these things that, you know, people just think that that person's ill, but is it? Or is it just that the body's saying to them, the environment or something they're using or something is just not right for them? I think there's a fine line. I think it's so important to know. So you'll know, Joanne, how important it is to give him what we call cushioning to support them. And the challenge is when someone has these levels, and obviously a lot of you will have, but to different degrees. It's one of those things you're trying to live in the world that we're living in. And you're trying to set up the boundaries and not protect yourself or protect anyone too much that they then cannot function. And there's a fine line. I remember when I had the noise, I mean, I do still have noise sensitivity, but it was so painful all the time. And some of the doctors had said to me, no, don't wear anything for your ears because you're worse. But I was passing out. I was collapsing. I couldn't have people even come into the house. I had to tell everybody not to put phones on. Even if somebody clanked a bit of metal, I was at horrendous pain. But what I did was I bought something that slightly reduced the sound. I started wearing something that was an earplug that and I didn't wear it when I didn't use it when I didn't need to. I only needed it so that I didn't depend on it. And I actually have done a lot better. When I tried to go out with nothing, I was ill for weeks, right? So it's like, everybody's different. So obviously my situation is maybe a bit different because there was a physical disease, right? And there was other things going on. But there is a fine line we all are different and we have to look at what we need to do. Sometimes we have to do things that we maybe don't want to do. And that's okay. And it's sometimes just to get through those situations. So if we look at this week, this person is emitting nice energy. Look at all that stimuli. Now, if that person is able to keep a high vibe, is very grounded, their body's, you know, aligned and all that, it's easier. They can stay in the center, but it depends on how much stimuli. If you think there's a lot of energy going around about that, right? So when we become triggered, or we become, or we're not balanced, or we're not living our purpose, or we're not speaking our truth, or whatever, right? Then we go off balance and these things can knock us over, right? So the first important thing, and most people will know this as an empath and sensitive, you need to be centered and grounded. That is basics 101. For the empath or the highly sensitive person to become more resilient to the energy, the world around them, and the emotions of trauma within them, because no matter who we are, we all have some level of trauma. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, this disease is caused by trauma, or this is, every single person has some level of trauma within them, even if they don't think, right? And it comes to different degrees, right? And we're all triggered by, and dis-ease is anything that makes us uncomfortable. We don't even look to like, or someone, it triggers us when they do this. It can be your partner, it can be a friend, it can be something on TV, someone with a different belief. Anything that can do that can make us feel out of, and we're not in a state of being, right? So the need to be centered and grounded within your own energy field is important, and you need to become more fully in the body. Most empaths and sensitives have spent more time out of the body than in the body. And some people have never even energetically been fully in their body. If they've had trauma from a baby or before they were born, they come in with a compromised nervous system. And you'll see this also in, say, children have had a lot of operations when they were children, and a lot of trauma physically, that the way that they want to escape is out the body. If someone who's likes to be in a daydream world all the time, doesn't want to face reality, likes to hide their head in the sand, that again can be all signs of they're not centered and grounded. Also, people that get very spaced out when they're meditating or sleepy, again, can be signs that they're not centered and grounded. So it's really important to get centered and grounded. I believe it's really important to access inner stillness, and it's one of the reasons why I'm a big advocate of meditation, and not just any type of meditation that helps you access deep stillness, right, and inner peace, and gives you a sense of being able to, in many ways, detach from the mind, be able to, and what I mean is loosen the attachment, maybe not just detach, it's loosen the attachment from the ego. So the ego is not always overtaking. Because when you're in a state of inner stillness, right, you are in a natural state of being, you're in a natural balance, and you witness the world around you as the observer. You're not as entangled as what the empath tends to get entangled with other people's emotions, right? And then ends up bends and does somersaults and everything, right? And in highly sensitive, because there is so much stillness, if you're in a state of stillness and being, you're connected spiritually in a way, you're centered, you're in the 0 point, right? You're not trying to make anything happen. That's why, a lot of people going about positive mindset, and positive mindset does have its place, but I don't believe it's the whole thing, because that means a lot of work. If you can get into inner stillness, it's a lot easier to have a natural state of being and to go with the flow and be guided in your life and flow with your purpose when you're in stillness. If you have to keep trying to change your mind and correct your mind process all the time, I think also the person's restless somewhere, they're not connected, they're not accessing stillness, and they're not always in their purpose or in a state of being. They're in a state of restlessness, something in their souls, they're just not in that flow. That's, I suppose, the easiest way to say, right? And if you're not in flow, then you're easily triggered, right? Obviously, you have to be able to relax. Now, my students know how important this is. Part of any stress resilience or stress management program is teaching people how to get off the stress response and into the relaxed response. Many people who have, if you've been highly empathic and highly sensitive most of your life, most people arrive that point with a high level of anxiety and stress. And often they are the doers in life. They are often the busy bees in life. They are the overgivers, the overdoers, and they find it difficult to switch off. And the ability to relax is underestimated. You need to be able to relax, you need to switch off and be a human being rather than a human doing. And when we get into that state of being in flow, again, it's easy to be more energetically aware, be more body aware, be more aware when you've been triggered and when you're off balance and you're not centered, right? If you find it difficult to relax, you're really in the stress response most of your life, or most of the time. If you find it hard to get a really deep quality sleep and wake up refreshed, you're struggling to relax, right? You also have to be able to listen to your intuition, your inner guidance. And you might assume just because someone is an empath and a sensitive that they do, but the reality is that's not always the case. And, we're seeing that a lot at the moment, where people being very disabled by fear over the last few years and not using their intuition and guidance for anything in their life, and letting other people constantly make decisions for them rather than coming from a more inner guidance of empowerment and balance, right? So that often comes by conditioning. It can come by programming. It can come by being triggered by certain things, or not trusting yourself, or not being able to identify what is intuition and when it's the mind. And again, that's to do with an overbusy mind, the inability to relax, and the inability to be still. But when you can be still and be able to relax, your intuition comes very strong and clear, and it comes in a way that is so strong, often you will just know things, right? And that's your inner guidance. And if you can live It's so much easier to live your life with strong intuition and guidance. That makes your life less stressful. So empowerment and balance comes from being able to listen to your intuition and know when it's intuition, right? And a knowing. And that's partly understanding how that information comes through to you, right? Your inner guidance and your knowing, and when it's someone else's, right? Because it's so easy for other people to put on their opinion. And I have to be honest, I've lost count of the amount of things that my inner guidance has saved me health-wise, and known things that I shouldn't have known. And it really, really helped me. And I also have friends, one of my friends saved his own life in a situation where something was going to happen medically, and he was told, and it was a life and death situation, and he saved his own life by making a decision, being spiritually guided, right? When someone lives their life in a more natural, intuitive state of being, instead of being controlled by conditioning in the world outside and fear, right, we're more empowered. When you're becoming more empowered, your energy is stronger, you're more alive, you're more grounded, you're more centered, and when you're more empowered, you're going to be more resilient. Your energy feels more resilient. If any of you have read the Celestine Prophecies, all the books for that was one book that made me understand energy a lot more. So it must have been about, I don't know, was it 1991? I had started going to Reiki, and I started training in Reiki. And my dad bought me, he'd read some of the Celestine Prophecy books, and he gave me one of the books, and it must have been, I think, 92, 93, because it was one of the first it was out, and I started reading the series. And I remember he talked about, and I think this is often seen in empaths, it described two parents, and this child it was like the energy was drained out of them. And in the book, it explained that it was the parents were draining the energy out the child. And my dad didn't see it as they were draining me, but he felt a lot of people, friends and other people that were around me, were draining my energy. And he said, when he read it, he just looked at me and thought, oh my God, that's our Eileen, right? So I think, obviously, on an unconscious level, I was giving it away, right? And a lot of us give it away. But I was not owning my power. I was very disempowered, and I was easily controlled. I was easily manipulated, right? So we've got to take our power back as an empath. That's one of the most important things, and as a sensitive, right? So we want to be more balanced. We want our energy to be more flowy. We want to be in a state of being rather than doing. People pleasing. Yeah, Rosemary, I can understand that. To see for everybody else. Yeah, people pleasing is the big thing, and I think that that we know that comes back to self-worth and all sorts of conditioning, and that also, when you go back to the inner child, and that's one of the big, another thing that I do, and alongside archetypes, and I know Rosemary, you work with archetypes, when you understand what happens and what's triggered within our child and why we have chosen a certain way to function, there is definitely a part of that, the nature and not the aspect, and that's about us fitting in to a certain way of being. And at the time, it's often there to protect us, but obviously in the long term, it can be dysfunctional, right? So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to teach you something, and this actually did cost me a lot of money to learn, but I'm just going to share it with you, right? So I'm going to share you one level of it, right? So I'm going to put the video, and I'm going to share it a tool. Some of you might be aware of this tool. I feel it's really important that people at the moment, with everything that's going on in society, and I'm watching people be more and more disempowered and not taking their power back and not listening to their intuition and whatever, and I think it's really, really important. So I'm going to teach you a technique how to be still. I'll actually just stop the share. Okay, sorry, see if you can see. Now, if anybody wants to, before I do that, if any want to ask anything in the chat, just feel free. Or you can download the Celestine Meditations by Al Muriel on Audible. Oh, right. Oh, I didn't know that, Janie. Oh, okay, that's good to know. Okay, so what I'm going to do is show you. So basically, you're going to take your thumb and your first finger and do that. Right, we're going to do it this way. There's different ways you can do this, right? But just for easiness, you know, some of my students know another technique like this. But you're going to take your thumb and your first finger, and you're just going to focus on the energy between the 2 points. Right, so you're going to close your eyes when we do it. I'm just wanting to show you what we're going to do with the hand positions. So you're going to do that, and you're going to do the same with that. So it's like a mudra position, but relaxed. But the main focus of this is that you actually are aware of the energy between your fingertips. Now, this is for your use only. There is a reason, because the person that's trademarked these techniques, you cannot teach it unless you actually have done his training. So just make it aware. You can do it for personal use, but you would get into trouble if you started doing it. On this man spent 40 years studying meditation and come up with a technique to get you into deeper stillness. So there's different ways you can do it. I don't have much time tonight, but we're going to do it this way. So what I would recommend, no matter what type of stillness technique you do, if you're an empath or a sensitive, you want to get grounded first, because you may find, as I said, meditation, particularly deep meditation and certain things, you just want to go to sleep or you feel spaced out. One of the things that people sometimes get confused with is guided meditations and meditation as in a guided visualization. Meditation is different from guided visualization, so we're clear about that, right? Just need to, just in case there is any confusion. So what we're going to do is I'll do a few things, just a simple way to get grounded, and then you just follow my voice. And if you're unsure, every so often I'll just remind you. But what you're going to do with the fingers, you're going to, I don't really want you to see my skirt and my bare legs. But what you do is you rest your hands on your lap with the 2 fingers, right? There's another way you can do it. You can do it by using one finger if it's easier and placing it on the knee. Maybe we should do that way. I think maybe because that'll be easier for you to remember. One finger, and you're going to have another finger, and you're going to place them on, but you'll do one at a time. I'll talk you through it. Right, so just close your eyes, everyone, and if you have to open your eyes during it, it's fine, okay? But for at the moment, I want you just to close your eyes. I'm going to start with just a nice deep breath, just to let go of any tension and just drop your shoulders. And I want you to bring your awareness to your body. Body awareness as an empath in a sense of is really important, because, as I said, we go out our body. So bring your awareness to your body, and bring your awareness to your knees, right down to your calves, to your feet. Become aware of the weight of your feet. And then just imagine that you have big, strong roots moving through your feet down into the earth. And also at the same time, imagine a nice large root moving down from the root chakra, from the center of your being, moving right down into the core of the earth. And what you're doing is just imagining, like a tree, you're rooted, right? But you're bringing your energetic awareness down into the lower chakras and into the feet and into the chakras that are in the ground, right? So that what it does is it helps you be more in the earth and not. Empaths can be, it's almost they think that the earth's a horrible place. So it's to remind us that Mother Earth is nurturing and supportive and provides for us and is a safe space, right? So ground into the earth. Just imagine those roots going deep down into the soothing, nourishing energy of Mother Earth. And then you're just going to consciously allow that energy to move up, and then you just let it go. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start with your right finger, and you're going to take it's your pointy finger, and you're going to place that pointy finger on your thigh, and you're going to just focus on the energy between the 2 points. Nothing more, nothing less. So you're just bringing your energy focus to the point between these 2 points. So you're just focusing on the energy. You might feel it's heat, or you might want to just focus as if you're looking at it as a dot between the fingerprint and that point touching the skin or touching your trousers or your skirt. And then you just let it go. And then you're going to do the exact same with your left hand. So you're going to take the pointy finger again, place it on the thigh, become aware of the energy between the fingertip and the thigh or the skin, just that energy, and just focus your point of energy only on that point. Now what I'm going to do is anchor you into the energy, because I've done it for a long time. You do, the person that's teaching it and who has been doing it for years anchors the people in. So what we're going to do is you're going to go back to the right and place again, back down, focusing on the finger, just on that point. And you're going to place the left finger down at the same time, then, now. And then what you're going to do is imagine that there's a line being drawn from the right to the left, and then the left up to the top of the triangle. So you'd imagine a triangle, so you're going from right to left, and then the triangle is above your head. So basically you've got like a triangle in front of you, because you bring the line back, right back down. Okay. And then you just sit in the zone. And usually what it does, it kind of it's like almost like cuts off the circuit of the brain working too busily. If you feel as if you kind of get lost and your mind starts to get busy, you just anchor in. So you do again, you take the right finger down, focus on that point between the fingertip and point of cloth or skin, and just zone in. And take the other finger, zone in, and you place a line from the right to the left, then up above the head, then back down. And this is just part of, but it's good to get into the stillness. And this is the 0 point. This helps you get into the 0 point. So we're just going to sit in the stillness. And this is an easy way to quicken your meditation practice. And then what I want you to do is imagine that the triangle is going from the right foot, just like the way the fingers are, right? Right foot to, and a wee line along to your left foot, and then up right above your head and above the other triangle, and then back down. And if you feel ungrounded at any point, and you feel really spaced out too much, you can just take a nice deep breath in at your heart. And if you need to, just connect down, down. Imagine that connection from the heart right down the spine, and then down your legs and down into Mother Earth. And then I just want you in your own time just to let go of those, your fingers. And just, it's really important to get really grounded again. So become consciously aware of your feet, even just being aware of the weight of your feet. And, you know, as if you're pressing into the ground, can just give you a sense that you're drawing your energy down. And be aware. And a good thing to do is do your feet and your feet, your ankles and your ankles, your calves and your calves, your knees and your knees, your thighs and your thighs, your hips and your hips, your back and your back, your tummy and your tummy, your chest and your chest, your shoulders and your shoulders, your arms and your arms, your hands and your hands, your fingers and your fingers, your neck and your neck, your head and your head. And then just in your own time, just bring yourself back. I'm sorry, this seating position's not really good. It's just, you find that I'm getting uncomfortable recently, so it's trying to get a chair in the house that I'm comfortable in. My office chair, I don't know where it is, I'm just not comfortable at the moment. That's good, Jeannie, thank you. Glad you benefited from it. I wondered how everybody else got on. I know some of you have maybe done some of this technique before, some of you haven't, so it can maybe, it's like anything that you know, it takes time to practice and master. Well, I just want to check everybody's okay. If any are feeling a bit spaced out. It's all okay. Good. Okay. Did MD not feel? Did MD struggle with it? Okay, so as usual, I always end up talking much, and I don't get doing as many techniques as I would. One of the other things that's really important is to be energetically aware. One of the big things that and you know, I'm going to end this soon, but I just think it's really important to share. One of the big things that I saw, because I've worked with so many healers, and personally I went to myself, but also worked with helping them. And a lot of one of the things was many people carrying attachments and not realizing, and doing all the techniques that they were told, but still unaware that they were carrying attachments. And that can happen for a lot of reasons. The more that you're spiritually connected and the more that you do certain things, it does help you have more energetic discernment and spiritual discernment and intuit, you know, more discerning in your intuition. But it's so important to clear your energy every day. And one of the first things we do is, you know, being able to scan your own energy in your body and be aware of your own energy field and get used to what your own energy field feels like, right? Be more in your body so that you know when something feels as if it's invaded in your energy field. Now, some things can be very subtle and things can be there for years that you don't know. And some healers are quite surprised because they do some courses and they feel they've cleared everything. And then they maybe do another level of training, another level, and they're shocked because actually there's other things that start leaving, that is because of the level of it's the level of consciousness at that time, right? So that they're raising their vibration. So often when we do work, we're always moving up in a level. And that's one of the reasons also why many people who would not have called themselves empaths or sensitives are actually now saying, and I would never have said it was an empath or a sensitive, but I feel as if things are changing because consciously on the earth, we're evolving. And there's also part of, I think, that we're being forced to wake up to the gifts that are there, and we're being forced to start going inwards and not allow the world to control us in an environment, and for us to take back our power. So I don't know what your thoughts on that, but that's what I feel is really important. I hope that you've had some benefit. Is there anything that you want to ask, please use the chat, because I did add a little bit of time for this. It will click off because it is an automatic thing I use through my platform, but I still have time to take any questions if anyone has any questions. Don't be shy. You're very welcome, Joe. You're very welcome, Diane. Okay, very welcome, everyone. So always have a lovely evening. Okay, there will be a recording of this. It might be a couple of days because I've got a few things going on at the moment. I'm having problems editing some of my videos. My computer's playing up, but I will get it loaded up for these, and you will get access to it. Okay, you're very welcome, everyone. Okay, have a lovely evening and enjoy the rest of your week. Okay. Oh, I forgot to mention. I have a Magic of Archetype course running, and it's for empaths and healers, and it starts next week. Starts next Wednesday, and it runs for 5 weeks. And what is it? It's mostly coming for your superpower archetypes. I know Rosemary does the money ones. It's a bit different from that. And it's about you owning where your 3 main power is, your master, and how it can apply either to your business or your purpose. And it also helps you look at your own power strengths and where your vulnerabilities, and that can involve your gifts where you're not owning your super gifts, right? And where you're maybe you're pushing something under the surface, right? And I think for most people at the moment, for lots of reasons, people are being pivoted into different directions, or they're being pivoted to change how they do things. And I believe it's because more and more people are being pushed into more alignment with their soul, right? So it's a course, and it goes on, it's a 5-week course, but each session's about 2 hours. And as I said, it starts next Wednesday night. So if any are interested, just let me know. But again, have a lovely evening. Thank you for, turning up, okay, and getting involved. So have a great week, everyone. Bye-bye.